And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another tremendous installment from very high above all the puerile and insipid forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics studio in, well, no, we're not either. See, I can't remember where I'm at. It's because I'm in the middle swamp and nobody really wants to be here. But anyway, I'm broadcasting to you from the depths of the middle swamp in Wyoming's capital of Cheyenne. Welcome to the program, my friends. Happy Thursday. We've got a lot to do this morning on the program. I've got a great interview with U.S. Representative Harriet Hageman that I'm going to play for you here in just a little bit. On the podcast yesterday. Sorry about that. I didn't realize that it only uploaded 17 seconds of the show, but it's all fixed. And if you want to listen to the podcast and the audio of the interview with Harriet, go ahead. But I'm going to play the full thing for you on today's program. And so we'll probably do that at the bottom of the hour. Also, lots of stuff happening in the Wyoming legislature. And we're finally getting to a point where we can talk about some bills. You know, up until now, pretty much everything has been introductory votes. And again, I know I sound like a broken record, but I'm still seeing stuff in mostly the national media saying, Wyoming passed this. No, well, Wyoming hadn't passed anything yet. So if you're just now joining and you haven't figured out, or you don't know how the budget session works, anything that is not budget related has to have a 2/3 vote. And so that's mainly what's been happening the last few days. Though yesterday, they did get to a couple of little bit of committee of the whole. Committee of the whole is the first reading on a bill. And so it's the first time you get to see some debate. So there was some of that happened. But other stuff that happened, I'm sure you've seen the news this morning. My pal Rebecca Bextel is on the front page of just about every newspaper. And so here's the facts. What happened is after the session, I can't remember what day it was. I think it was probably Monday or Tuesday. But after the session was over, after everybody was leaving, the session had adjourned for that day. Rebecca went and handed a fundraising check to one of the legislators, and Carly Provenza. By the way, she couldn't have snapped a better picture of that. Carly, you should have been a photographer. That was crack work there. But anyway, so she handed a check to a legislator on the floor of the House, and a picture was taken. Now, here's my thoughts of it. I think that there's a right place and a wrong place. There's a time and a place for everything. And that's probably not the best place. I'll admit that. But the truth is that is nothing that hasn't happened before. It just is. This is the first time Carly Provenza has been around to take a picture of it. And, you know, like I say, there's a time and a place for everything, and that wasn't the right time nor the right place. But I want to direct you to something else, and I want to try to put this into context for you. Right outside either the House chamber or the Senate chamber is what they call Ambush Alley. You know why it's called that? because that's pretty much the only way out of that chamber. And all the lobbyists and all of the journalists and everything, they line up in that little hallway right outside the legislative chamber because it's pretty easy to be able to get a hold of one of the legislators because, I mean, they got to leave the chamber, right? And they're going to walk right by you. So why not hang out there? Now, the reason why it has the name Ambush Alley is that a lot of legislators get ambushed out there. And you don't think that this sort of thing has happened out there. I'm sure that it has. The truth is that Rebecca raises a lot of money for legislators, and candidates all over the place. And it just so happened that that's where she saw the representative she handed the check to. And so that's what happened. And so, like I say, is there anything wrong with fundraising during a legislative session? Nope, not a thing about it. The truth is, like, the left would have snapped a picture of Rebecca anywhere. She could have been on the steps leading up to the chamber, some other place in the Capitol building, in the outside on the Capitol steps. The same thing would have happened regardless. But like I say, there's a time and a place for everything, and I just think that choice was probably not the best one, and it certainly gave an opportunity for Carly Provenza to take a pretty good picture. But like I say, that's nothing that hasn't happened before. Rob Geringer, we lovingly call him Governor Geringer, because every time he gets up to speak on the floor, he sounds like he's running for governor. He is the son of Jim Geringer, the former governor. He was on Jake in the 307 this morning, the morning show on the Cowboy. And he went on. Yeah, I mean, he went on for a few minutes. I didn't get my check. Well, that's because you're a flaming redcoat, Rob. But it's unfortunate that this is a distraction, which is what it is. And I think you deserve a little bit more context on this too. Why did Mike Yen choose that moment to bring this up on the floor? Because the bill was John Bears that would have, and I think it was House Bill 141. I'll look it up here in a little bit. But anyway, what it was would have done away with housing mitigation fees. What housing mitigation fees are is you have to pay in Jackson, definitely, and there are some other communities that are trying to do this. You have to pay the local government in order to build something on your property. Let me say that again. You have to pay the local government to do something with your own personal property. And in the case of Jackson, many people have paid tens of thousands, and they tried to charge way more than that for some other folks. Well, that was the bill that was on the floor. And by the way, it passed introduction. So that is going to be introduced into committee. Well, Mike Yen and the rest of the Democrats and the contingent from Jackson, they have been adamantly opposed to this. When it was brought up last year, it was Senate File 40, and they're just opposed to it because they don't want that source of revenue for the town of Jackson to go away. And it's absolutely wrong. Nobody can tell you what to do on your own private property, not the least of which is any of the government in Jackson, but they're trying. And so it's a way to control you. It's a way to control your personal property. So that was the bill that was on the floor. So right in the middle of it, Mike Yen stands up and he essentially accuses Rebecca of bribery. Now let's talk about the check for a minute. It was a fundraising check. It was not signed by Rebecca Bextel. And like I say, it was something that hasn't happened before, and just wrong place, wrong time. There's a reason why I don't go down near the chambers, because I know that there's cameras everywhere. Not that I would do anything different, but I can see everything I need to see up in the gallery, and I just don't want to deal with the mess down there. On occasion, I'll go down to Ambush Alley to see if I can grab an interview or a comment from a legislator, but I just don't go down there. It doesn't add anything to the program for me going down next to the floor. Unless, of course, I need a comment from somebody or, trying to grab an interview. But a lot of that stuff, I really wish that we didn't have to deal with money in politics. But the truth is, there's money in all politics. And the left is mad because for so long they have had, and by the left, I don't just mean the Democrats. I mean the liberal Republicans and the Democrats for a really long time. They've had a lock on fundraising, on raising tremendous amounts of money for campaign, and they're just mad that conservatives have some donors too. And that's really the genesis of this. And it's unfortunate that this has become such a giant distraction. So let's talk about the media in this. If this happened to one of the Democrats, I'd probably run a couple stories on it. But they're seizing on it to direct your attention away from what's actually going on, with the legislation that's happening, what is being done on the floor. And it's a convenient one. I'll give them that you're focusing on the stuff that has nothing to do with the legislative session, that is this check controversy, and you're not paying attention to the legislation. And there's a lot of stuff that's really, really important that's happening. It's I kind of made fun of an article yesterday, and the more that I think about it, I kind of agree a little bit. But the piece was from the Cowboy, and it was Governor Gordon kind of pleased that nothing is making it past the introductory vote. And I think you'll hear this part of this discussion in my interview with Harriet. We talked about it a little bit this morning. It's not a bad thing that the majority of what we're going to talk about is the budget. I think that's what our founders intended, that we have a budget session, and that should be the main focus of it. And and whether you realize it or not, every legislative session, there's about 600 bills that get filed. Even though I don't know what the official number is this year, I'll have to go to LSO and ask them. But it's a lot of bills, and many of them have nothing to do with the budget. And so the reason why that 2/3 threshold is there is so that, hey, unless everybody's got to agree that this is important, and before you can talk about it. And so, I'm kind of in agreement on that. I am one of those people that thinks that when government doesn't do anything, that works out better for the people, because there is no greater risk to your liberty than when the legislature is in session. And so, hey, if we're only going to talk about the budget, I'm probably okay with that. Even though I was pretty pleased to see a couple of gun bills go through. We're going to add, one of them is to add a criminal or a civil penalty to the red flag seizure bill. There's a similar one with the SEPA bill. And so there are a couple of gun related bills that, they got voted on, pretty overwhelmingly. I'm not sure about the SEPA one. I'll check that one during the break. That one may have been shot down. So anyway, lots of stuff happening. I've got a list here. Let me open up my tab. And I wanted to tell you about a couple of bills that didn't make it, or that did. In fact, one of them, and this one I have been talking about for a long time, but it's House Bill 19. It's Carly Provenza's corner crossing bill. That one's interesting. They killed the elected attorney general bill. I have mixed feelings about that one. HB 51, the random hand count ballot, that one, or bill, that one failed too. I think that one is super important. If you're interested in election integrity, that was a pretty important one. And then HB 48 was pen and paper ballots. I think that one's important too. And most people look at that and they say, well, we already have pen and paper ballots. No, not every county does. In Laramie County, you vote on a computer. And then you take your little receipt up and it shows you where you voted. But really all you get after you vote is this little barcode. So there's a lot of stuff that went down the tubes, important things that I think we need to talk about. But a lot of stuff's died. So anyway, so let's go ahead and take our first break. And when we come back, I've got a couple pieces I want to talk about, and then we'll get to the interview with Representative Hageman. But first, an absolutely outrageous profit timeout. Back in a minute. Yeah, I know. The weather seems to be toying with us. 60 one day, 42 the next, and pretty soon, my friends, those 6s and 4s are going to turn into 3s and 2s. Though we all want to avoid it, that white stuff is coming, my friends, and you will be shoveling the walk in it. It's cold, it's unpleasant, and nobody likes to do it. But you could make it just a little bit more comfortable and prevent your feet from turning into a giant block of ice. In fact, you could keep them nice and warm and toasty, and your toes will never even know that they're outside. The rest of you may be frozen solid, but at least your feet won't be. To make all this happen, you just need a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They are the finest socks that I've ever put on my feet. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you won't be disappointed. Are you one of those guys that listen to the president just a little bit too closely and now you're tired of winning? Are you getting the feeling that there's been way too many good things happening in our country and you just can't take it anymore? Well, if you are, and you think you should follow Rosie O'Donnell's example and get the heck out of Dodge, you need to call Rebecca Bextel at eXp Realty. She'll make those foreign country living ideas a reality for you. All you have to do is call 307-699-3519, and she'll make sure some freedom-loving, red-blooded American will now live in the home that you no longer want. If you want to sell your house, or if you want to buy one that's way better than the house you have right now, give Rebecca a call. Again, her phone number is 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Cowboy State Politics is only going to get stronger. This program is only going to continue to expand. Already, we got the Cowboy State Politics Live, the podcast, the Outrider, which I still have to get a newsletter out to you. I've been trying to work on that. You know, things get really crazy during the legislative session, but no excuses, no excuses. I got to get my work done. All right, welcome back to the program, my friends. It's Cowboy State Politics Live on a Thursday. I, of course, am David Iverson, documented to be almost always right 99% of the time. Now, I mentioned before the break that there have been a lot of bills that have been killed. One of those was to kind of revamp the court. And this is a piece from the Cowboy. It's entitled, Wyoming Senate Kills Bill to Revamp the Courts. 3 more still alive. And I quote, one piece of Wyoming legislation aimed at changing the way Wyoming chooses judges and structures courts failed its introductory vote Wednesday in the Senate. But at least there's 3 more reform bills remained viable as of that afternoon. State Senator Sherry Steinmetz asked her colleagues to vote to introduce Senate Joint Resolution 4, which it would have changed significantly how Wyoming chooses judges. Steinmetz referenced a high-profile judicial decision on the floor Wednesday as her rationale for seeking to change how it's shaped. She clarified to the Cowboy in a later text message that she was talking about the January 6th Wyoming Supreme Court decision. The High Court's ruling struck down the state's abortion ban, declaring abortion a fundamental right. Now, there's a lot that's going into this. Now, remember my discussion from earlier in the week where we talked about the Chief Justice saying, we follow the law. Now, the Chief Justice, in her State of the State address, or State of the Judiciary address, she didn't directly reference the abortion ruling, but that's what she was talking about. We follow the law. Really? Where is it written that abortion is health care, except now in a court ruling? So for a long time, the Wyoming Supreme Court has created law out of whole cloth. It's not their job. Their job is to judge the law. Their job is not to write law. And it made me laugh that the Chief Justice went on and on about the 3 co-equal branches of government. Well, if she really believes that, then why is she creating law from her bench? Fascinating. Well, I have talked a lot about how we choose judges, and in fact, the Chief Justice referenced my program in her remarks. You know, you've made it when that happens. Anyway, the way that we choose judges is pretty darn political, if you ask me. And so Senator Steinmetz is. Well, her bill would have changed that. And like the piece in the Cowboy says, there's 3 other bills alive. Let's see here. The resolution failed introduction. Let's see here. Had Joint Resolution 4 survived the legislature and a vote of the people, it would have inflated the Judicial Nominating Commission to 7 members, from 7 members to 9, and changed its makeup. For example, the nominating commission currently vets judgeship applicants and advances 3 names to the governor for him to appoint 1 to the bench. It comprises 3 non-lawyers appointed by the governor, 3 lawyers chosen by the Wyoming State Bar, and then the Chief Justice. The resolution would have kept the governor's 3 non-lawyers as part of the Judicial Nominating Commission and 2 of the State Bar's members, but it would have changed the rest of that panel, requiring that the State Senate President to appoint another non-lawyer to the panel and the Speaker of the House to do the same. The resolution would have let the panel nominate between 3 and 5 prospective judges instead of just 3, and it would have tasked the state Senate with confirming the governor's appointees to the Wyoming Supreme Court's bench. Senate File 103, which was proposed by Brian Boner, remained viable as of in. Okay, so I don't know what the right solution to the Judicial Nominating Commission is. I certainly don't want to get into a situation where judges are elected. I think we have a really good example of what would happen if we did that in the most recent judicial or Supreme Court election in Wisconsin. Gobs and gobs of money was thrown into that election, and I don't want my judges decided on that. So now I don't know if somehow we put. Well, we've already got, and here's the other part of it. This is the argument on the other side. We already have, all of our judges have to stand for retention in an election. The only thing is, most voters have no idea what their judges are doing, and so they just kind of mark the box. Yeah, retain judge. I never vote that, by the way. I never vote to retain a judge, simply because I don't think that judges ought to be there for life. I think you serve for a while, and in Wyoming, they're not. When you're 70 years old, at least on the Supreme Court, you retire. I don't know what the solution to that is. Maybe one solution is to have nominees approved by the Senate, maybe to have some sort of confirmation hearing. This is not an easy issue to solve. All I can tell you right now is that Wyoming being one of the 5 states that appoints their attorney general and does it this way. But it's not one of the 5 states that chooses judges this way. That's the attorney general. That's a different topic. But man, you know what? I don't know that there's an easy solution to this. I think a confirmation hearing might be a good step. If there's some really, really, really radical judge that a governor is nominated, like, I don't know, maybe it could be Drag Show Clark Stith or Tim Stubbson. Both of those guys were on a list to become judges. Fortunately, Governor Gordon did not pick old Stubby. That was a good decision on his part. I can tell the governor he did a good job when he does. But all I know is the method that we have right now is not exactly working, and I don't like it at all. Because I think it's highly politicized, no matter what the Chief Justice or former Chief Justice Kate Fox has to say. I don't see how you can look at that and think that it is in any way nonpartisan. That just doesn't compute for me. When the governor appoints non-lawyers to the commission, and then it's the Bar Association that appoints the other half, the Bar Association is not nonpartisan, and I'm sure none of them have judicial ambitions. I'm sure none of them would like to be a Chief Justice or a Supreme Court Justice. So don't tell me that what we have isn't highly political. And it could be in the end, and I don't like this possibility, but it could be in the end that we have the worst possible system that you could ever devise. but it's the best one out there, as Benjamin Franklin would have said. So I don't know what the solution is, but there's a couple of bills to change that. Let's see, how much time we got? We got 5 minutes left until the break. All right, so the Wyoming Business Council. This one's going to be a hot topic when it comes to the budget, and it already is. There's a piece in the Turkey Vulture this morning. Lawmakers file bills to save the Wyoming Business Council. Let me just read you the opening paragraphs of it here, and I quote, Laramie County lawmakers have filed legislation to potentially save the Wyoming Business Council after the agency's funding was cut from the proposed state budget. The move is in line with pleas from Governor Mark Gordon after the Joint Appropriations Committee voted to cut most of the funding. The bills, introduced in each chamber, House Bill 150 and Senate File 100, seek to find a middle ground in a growing uncertainty over the future of the state's primary economic... Okay, I love this line from the media. The state's primary economic development agency. If that is true, then we suck at it because at best, the Wyoming Business Council's record is hit and miss. Their failures have been spectacular. And the truth is, in the 27 years that agency has been around, the GDP of Wyoming has gone down. And I mean, that's over all their projects. So if that is your economic record, you can't possibly claim that you are the chief economic driver of Wyoming. It just does not compute. And they have a philosophy that is absolutely at odds with just about how everybody else thinks about business. That businesses should rise or fall on their own. That government should stay the heck out of it. That the government shouldn't be choosing who wins and who doesn't. I mean, it is absolutely ridiculous if you ask me. I think we need to do away with the Business Council. Plus, we already have another organization that does that in the state. It's called the Grants Office. But anyway, so let's see here. We're pretty well close to the bottom of the hour. So let's go ahead and take our second break. And when we come back, we'll do our interview with U.S. Representative Harriet Hageman. Back in a minute. Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics. Hunting season. Right about now, you're off with all of your pals, stalking the big gigantic elk or buck mule deer that you've been thinking about all summer long. And your lovely wife is at home, probably enjoying her time without you. But soon, my friend, all of that is going to come to a screeching halt. And I want you to think about just one little thing. She's able to park her car inside the garage because all of your hunting crap is with you right now. Now, if you'd like the marital bliss to continue, I suggest you make a call to Marcos and Jesse at Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. They can build you a garage or a barn or any other type of metal structure for you to store all of your toys in so that your wife can continue parking inside the garage. And you can avoid sleeping on the couch for the next month or two. Call Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. Get them to build you a metal building before it's too late. Welcome back to the program. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live down in the middle swamp. Thank you for watching the program. Thank you for everything you do for this show. Of course, I couldn't do any of this without you. And so thank you very much. Welcome back to the show. To the open range record. You know, one of the things that I love being able to do in having the open range record is a little bit of satire. And I just wanted, there's a wonderfully funny piece on the open range record. Let me just show it to you real quick. Let's see if I can pull that off. Where is it? Yeah, here we go. It's called Horses with More Sense Than the Legislature. And just, I'll read you the opening couple of paragraphs here. Because nothing says public safety like letting a horse do the thinking. Sorry, I can almost not do this without laughing. All right, so because nothing says public safety like letting the horse do the thinking. In a bold move to protect Wyoming's historically reliable designated drivers, the legislature has introduced the so-called Saddles Not Steering Wheels Act, a clarification that confirms what frontier wisdom has long suggested, that if you're drunk, just let your horse handle it. Under HB 31, a vehicle is officially not a vehicle if it has four legs, eats hay, and possesses better judgment than its rider. Cars are regulated, trucks are regulated, ATVs are regulated, but a half-ton animal with a mind of its own? Perfectly acceptable. This bill carves out an exemption for horses, mules, and other equines when ridden by a person, meaning that driving under the influence laws no longer apply, as long as the steering wheel has been replaced by reins. Somewhere, my friends, there is a state trooper quietly wondering whether field sobriety tests now apply to quarter horses. You got to go read the whole thing, my friends. It's wonderfully funny. It's on the open range record right now. I laughed my guts out when I heard of it. All right. So yesterday, I had a chance to sit down and visit with U.S. Representative Harriet Hageman. This has become kind of a tradition on Cowboy State Politics. During the legislative session, I've almost always got an interview with Representative Hageman. And so we sat down and visited yesterday, and she convinced me to talk about something that I've been kind of loath to discuss. I am so sick of Jeffrey Epstein. I understand there might be some important stuff in there. I just don't want to talk about it. I'm tired of it. I've been tired of it for a really long time. But anyway, she had Pam Bondi in front of her committee yesterday, and so we talked about Epstein. Here is my interview with U.S. Representative Hageman. All right, joining me on the program is U.S. Representative Harriet Hageman. Harriet, welcome back to the show.
Hey, David, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm down here in Cheyenne for the legislative session, and you know it's only day 3 actually, and I'm already worn out.
You know, I'm going to give a lot of credit to our legislators in Wyoming. This is part-time, 40 days one year, 20 days the next. But boy, they pack a lot into those few short weeks. They're so dedicated to the state. They're so dedicated to their craft. And I think most of them want to do the right thing. We may have some differences of opinion as to what that is, but I give them a lot of credit. They don't have a ton of staff. They have good staff, though what staff they have. But boy, I know what it's like to be a legislator. But fortunately, I have excellent staff both in Wyoming and in Washington, D.C. So I'm going to give a shout out to all of our overworked Wyoming senators and members of the House.
Well, I mean, you're absolutely correct that during a budget session, you've only got 20 days. And I think the number I heard at the beginning is a couple days ago, there had already been 400 bills filed.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
And just to get through the votes, whether or not you're going to talk about them, that's an extraordinary effort. I mean, they're still going through that. So you're right. I mean, I think they left the House maybe at 6:00 last night.
Yeah.
So yeah, they do a lot of work, and like you say, we don't necessarily agree a lot, but everybody's working hard.
They are.
So let's talk about what's happening in Washington, D.C. I understand you got a big hearing coming up.
We do. Today we're going to be, in Judiciary, we're going to have Attorney General Pam Bondi appearing before us.
Great. Well, I know a lot of people that would love to ask her a lot of questions. What do you see as the main issues that are going to come before the committee?
Oh, I think that the Epstein files are just going to be flogged extensively today. The production of the documents, whether they made mistakes in terms of redacting names or whether they over redacted, whether they under redacted, what they're finding, why other people have not been charged. I think that is that definitely the Democrats, and I assume Thomas Massey from Kentucky. That's what I think that they will hit on.
Well, and I think that there's a lot of people that are really sick of hearing, well, we're releasing all the Epstein files, and then not all of them are released, and then there's a second time around, and now we're on, I guess the third strike on this. So, as it relates to those, how important do you think the Epstein files are? I mean, we've seen some of them. Now we get the rest of them, I guess.
So I have voted a couple of times now to release the Epstein files, both through the Oversight Committee as well as the recent process where basically there was just a data dump of millions of pages of documents last week. I think that they're very important to certain people, and I think that we do need to understand the history of what happened here. I have serious questions as to why he was able to receive the sweetheart deal that he did in Florida many, many years ago. I don't know why they prosecuted the case the way that they did, or why they essentially let him off the hook. But what I also don't understand is why, even after being convicted of basically child of pedophilia, there were still many people in positions of power, including the Clintons and Stacey Plaskett, the Democrat delegate from the Virgin Islands in the U.S. House of Representatives. It sure didn't deter them from engaging with Epstein. I think that there's been this belief on the Democrat side that this would expose all the Republicans who were engaging with Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein was a leftist. He was a liberal. He was a Democrat. I've seen a lot of Democrat names being exposed. We know how close the Clintons were to him. I did learn yesterday that Donald Trump actually called the police on him in 2006 at Mar-a-Lago, telling them that they really needed to look into his behavior with young girls. So I think he was one of the first ones to realize that this guy was a real creeper and he needed to stay away from him. And any of the photographs you see of Trump with Epstein are, over 20 years old. And that's the very reason why he didn't want anything to do with them. I do think that it's important when you have something like this that it be exposed. I think that probably the Democrats, as they typically do, will overreach again today. And we probably ought to count the number of times that the word Epstein is thrown out there, because as you indicate, there's a lot of other very important things that are going on. I want to give this administration great credit for enforcing our borders, enforcing our immigration laws. I would like to see some other things happening more quickly, but I think that they're a bit overwhelmed. And I think that this Epstein data dump, I think it probably took an enormous amount of time for the office to comply and to get those documents out there.
Well, and in my opinion, this whole Epstein situation with all the files, it really is emblematic of the lack of transparency that we have across the breadth of government, and not only at the federal level, but at the state level. I mean, there are a couple of bills
by the state.
Yeah, and if we can't find out what an absolute criminal was doing, how do we expect that we're going to know what our agencies are doing, how we can get documents? And I think it's absolutely incredible that we're having a problem getting information to the public.
Well, but there's actually an explanation for some of that. And I think that this is where the real danger lies in what's happening with Epstein, and perhaps the expectations that people now have. A lot of the stuff that was dealt with Epstein was done through a grand jury proceeding. Grand jury proceedings are intentionally kept secret because, as they say, you can indict a ham sandwich. When you go into a grand jury proceeding, there is no other side that is told. So if I am the prosecutor, I can stand up and I can say, Jack Smith did X, Y, and Z, and present that to the grand jury. And Jack Smith is not in that room saying, I wasn't even there. I was out of the country that day. It is the prosecutor's opportunity to test their case in a very, very, very one-sided and biased framework and proceeding. And so grand jury testimony, grand jury evidence is often kept secret because they may say, well, I know that I saw Harriet Hageman standing on a street corner in Manhattan, and she was doing X, Y, and Z on February 11th, 2026. And I'm not there to say I was actually in Washington, D.C. on February 11th, 2026. So there's a lot of things in grand jury testimony or grand jury evidence that may not be truthful, that may not be accurate. I'm not accusing anyone of lying. I'm not accusing people of misremembering. I'm not accusing them of perjury. What I'm saying is that the reason that cross-examination is considered one of the most important tools that you would ever have in a judicial setting is because that's the tool that we use to test the veracity of what is before us. That doesn't happen in a grand jury. So part of what had to be released where the judges had to approve the release of grand jury materials, and that is a very, very unusual circumstance.
So just because I don't know, so in this latest release of documents, was most of that grand jury related?
I'm sure some of it was. I know that that's been part of the controversy over the last 3 months and even last fall, especially when Thomas Massey was really going after this. You need to release the documents. The Pam Bondi was saying, we've gone to the court. We filed a motion with such and such court for the release of the grand jury testimony and evidence, and the courts have denied our motion. Now that's a real separation of powers issue. She doesn't have the ability to force a court to release grand jury evidence. That's within the bailiwick and the jurisdiction of Article 3 judges. They have the right to make that determination. So I know that some of it was there. And here's another example of where this can be very dangerous. If you'll remember, one of these young women accused Alan Dershowitz, the attorney out of New York, of being someone who engaged in this behavior. He sued her for defamation, and she withdrew the claim and said, I was wrong. It wasn't him. I was mistaken. So that's an example where Alan Dershowitz has actually advocated for the release of this information because he says there's a lot of allegations out there that are not true, that we need to be able to substantiate that as well.
Well, and a good example of that is I was watching another radio program, and the host says, well, I showed up in the Epstein files, and what it was an email from Jeffrey Epstein complaining about this radio host. But how that gets reported in the media is radio host appears in Epstein files.
That's exactly right. And that's why this can be terribly, terribly dangerous. And again, I want there to be accountability, and I want people to pay for their crimes. If someone has committed a crime, they should be prosecuted. Jeffrey Epstein was. I don't think he was prosecuted correctly, especially in the Florida case, but he was prosecuted. But you have to be so careful about releasing these kinds of materials, because you can really ruin somebody's life for calling them up and saying, hey, I hear you're good at investment. Can you give me some advice? And then the next thing you know, you're fired from your job.
So another question I know a lot of people have as it relates to Pam Bondi, and my wife would have my hide if I didn't ask you this one. A lot of people are just wondering, why aren't more people in handcuffs? I mean, we went through the Russia hoax, and one of the promises of this administration is we're going to put people in cuffs. Why haven't we seen that?
In some circumstances, the statute of limitations has already expired. But here's something else that people have to understand. A lot of the cases that Pam Bondi would have to bring would be right here in Washington, D.C. And I want you to handicap for me what you think the chances are of getting convictions of a bunch of Democrats involved in the zero. If you think that you're going to get an Eric Swalwell or a Adam Schiff for all the lies that he told on TV, it's not going to happen. You know, part of the reason why they had the success rate with the January 6th defendants that they did was they had to try them right here in Washington, D.C. And as a result, it didn't matter whether they committed a crime or not. They were going to prosecute them, and they were going to throw them in prison for as long as they possibly could. The only person that was prosecuted was Kleinsmith for falsifying a document that stated that what's his bucket that they did the surveillance on, that he was not a CIA asset.
Yeah, Carter Page.
Carter Page. And he actually, what the email said was, he is a CIA asset. Klein Smith altered that email when he filed it with the court and changed it to read, he is not a CIA asset. He was prosecuted, and the jury barely convicted him of the slightest thing that they possibly could. He's already back practicing law. He was suspended from the practice of law for a period of time. He's back practicing law. So the cases that they would bring would be right here in Washington, D.C., and you're not going to get a grand jury or heck, the grand juries here are dismissing cases right now, which, and a moment ago I said you can indict a ham sandwich unless you're in Washington, D.C., and it's a liberal.
All right. So I know that you've got a number of pieces of legislation that are somewhere in the House. Why don't you give us an update on where your bills are at and when we might see those hit the Senate?
Well, we're still working on the grizzly bear, delisting of the grizzly bear, and my staff was meeting with Steve Scalise's staff yesterday to see when we can bring this to the floor. We're also working on Connor's Law. Connor's Law has to do with codifying English language proficiency requirements for truckers. We're also working on a bill, another trucker safety bill, road safety bill. Did you see last week that horrific truck accident? I believe it was in Indiana.
Oh, God, it was horrible.
That was horrible. Well, that was that was an illegal alien driving that truck. He killed those 4 gentlemen in that vehicle. He was in what they refer to as a chameleon. He was working for a chameleon trucking company. Have you ever heard that terminology? So essentially what these are is they're fly-by-night operations. The reason that these roads are becoming so dangerous is because these truckers are all illegal, are trying to avoid the checkpoints. So now they're not staying on the interstates. They're going on the 2-lane highways. They can't read English. They are illegal, and they're driving oftentimes very poorly maintained vehicles. A chameleon trucking company is one that it will be like Thomas and Sons is the name, and it'll have a DOT number on the door. When you see that, you'll see the Department of Transportation number. And they'll rack up all kinds of fines and all kinds of citations. But it takes a while for that to make its way through the system, for that DOT number to be revoked. When they start getting to the point where their DOT number is going to be revoked, they'll take that Thomas and Sons company, they'll take it down, they'll strip it of all assets, then they'll go in and they'll apply for a new DOT number. And so there's no accountability. So we have these horrific companies that are doing, illegally driving across our country. They have DOT numbers, but they're engaging in illegal behavior. And so we're going to be doing a bill to make it extremely costly if you are running a chameleon trucking company. Because that's exactly what this guy was. And in the article I was reading, they even used that terminology, saying he was working for a chameleon trucking company. So those are some of the things that I'm working on right now.
Okay, well, probably the most important question. Are you going to make it home during the session, or are you stuck in D.C.?
No, I will be home during session, not this week or next week because we're in session, but I believe the following week after that. No, I'm not sure that I will be there at the very end of February, the first part of March, I believe it is, and I will be able to come up. I've already indicated to several of the members that I'm going to come up and spend some time at the legislature. Excellent. Well, I look forward to seeing you. It's always a pleasure when we're down here. It's like one of the highlights. You get to see Harriet away from everything else that's happening in this swamp. Well, that was sweet, David. That was an early Valentine for me. All right, Harriet. Well, I got to run. Thank you very much for spending some time this morning. And look me up when you get here. I will. Thanks, David. All right. Thank you. Well, I don't know if we got too many answers from the good representative, but at least I was able to ask her the question of, hey, where's all these people in handcuffs? I mean, we've been told a lot
that a bunch of people were going to do the perp walk, and we'd see a whole bunch of them. And, whether you like Representative Hageman's answer or not, it's probably accurate that the statute of limitations has run out on, many of these cases. Now, one thing you did see, which I didn't think I would ever see, is Bill and Hillary Clinton marched into an oversight committee to give a deposition. And so, sometimes, we can't prosecute somebody criminally but, you can file a civil lawsuit, and sunlight is the best disinfectant all the time. So anytime you can have transparency on anything, that's a good thing. And oftentimes, the transparency there is the retribution, I guess, for us, exposing some of these characters to what they're doing. That's one of the reasons why on this program that I like, doing investigative stories about some of these political types. Like Eric Barlow was the most recent one we did on the Open Range Record. How he's got his own nonprofit and he's buying his own lamb and then selling it to the nonprofit, and he gets a tax break on it. So, so there's a lot of these different things that I really enjoy exposing, just showing you the truth. All right, we're going to take one more quick break, and when we come back, we're going to finish up the program. Back in a minute. Are you tired of all the meaningless political drivel floating around right now? Endless commentary that really doesn't have anything backing it up? Do you long for the days of true investigative journalism, coming from an authoritative source who really doesn't care how popular and apparently good-looking a politician is? Fortunately for you, that's what I do on Cowboy State Politics. New episodes are published every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and you can get them anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest way is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There, you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles I might bring up during the course of the program. Cowboy State Politics Live, the program you're listening to right now, is broadcast every Tuesday through Friday, beginning at 8 a.m. Pay attention to all of that other block-headed nonsense if you want. Just make sure that you don't miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live. It's Thursday, day 4 of the Wyoming legislative session. And, it is every day down here. And if you've never been down here, you really need to make the time. Just come and spend one day. You'll understand how much happens, how many different things happen in just one day. And so I pulled up the agenda for today, and there's a couple of bills that I cannot wait to hear about. So on the first thing they're going to do at 10 a.m. is a bunch of introduction votes, those 2/3 votes that I was talking about earlier. Number 2 on the list is Representative Rob Geringer's House Bill 150, the Wyoming Business Council Evaluation and Reform. That one's probably going to go over like a ton of bricks. I don't think it's going anywhere because the appetite in the House of Representatives, at least among the conservatives, is that program has definitely outlived its usefulness, and at the very most, it has been kind of detrimental to the state. They've lost a tremendous amount of money, and it amazes me when it comes out that okay, in 2024 they created 40 some odd jobs to the tune of 40 some odd $1 million. So wait a minute. For every job you created, it was $1 million. And so that comes out, and then Josh Durrell, he's on some program somewhere, explain, well, really, that's not exactly what happened. There's more nuance to it than that. That was one part of what we did. Yeah, but you still spent $40 million on 40 jobs. So I don't know how much, I don't know how much more nuance you need. But there's some other things that are happening this morning that I can't wait to listen to. Down on the list is the steering wheels or saddles, not steering wheels bill. Who knows if we'll get there? It's pretty far down on the list, but let's see here. Digital Taxonomy Acts, protection of parental rights, cause of action. That's Darren McCann's bill. That's a really important one because it was Representative Mark Jennings years ago that passed Wyoming's first parental rights law. And, with any piece of legislation, as time goes by, you realize things that if you had it to do over again, you would have included a couple of things. Well, this cause of action is one of those. So that's a really important piece of legislation. There's a kratom prohibition. Kratom, if you didn't know it, that's the stuff that's for sale in every gas station. They call it gas station heroin. I've never touched this stuff, but I hear that it's kind of bad. Of course, there is the bill from Carly Provenza to turn marijuana to a Class 3 substance. Actually, let's kind of look at that bill. That's kind of interesting. Here's what the introduction says on it. And I quote, "An act relating to the public health and safety, amending provisions relating to the scheduling and use of marijuana, repealing a conflicting provision, making conforming amendments, requiring rulemaking, providing for an effective date." And then let's see here. Basically, it's the camel's nose underneath the tent for legalizing pot. That's the way I'm taking it. I'm sure the good representative will have a different way of explaining it, but that's certainly what it sounds like to me. So then after all of those introductory votes, then we've got bills on second reading. And if you, as I think I explained yesterday, maybe not. So here's the process for a bill to become law in the budget session. So first, it has to have the introductory vote if it's not a budget item. So that's 2/3. Then it gets assigned to committee, and it has to pass the committee. And then it goes to the floor for committee of the whole. And then there's 3 readings. And then it gets a full vote. After the 3rd reading, it passes the House, if it's that fortunate. Then it goes over to the Senate. They send it to a committee. Then it goes to 3 readings in the Senate. And if it passes the 3rd reading there, and if they hadn't made any changes to it, which is hardly ever the case, then it would go to the governor. If they did make changes to it, then the House and the Senate, they get together in what's called a conference committee. And basically, they just resolve the differences between the 2 houses. So there's a number of bills on second reading. One of those, oh, and by the way, second reading is almost always just a procedural reading. There's really no debate on it unless something big happens and there's an objection or something. But almost always, that's just a procedural vote. And all it is the speaker runs through them. Second reading, boom, done, gone. And then there won't be anything on third reading. But the other big thing that's happening today, and then I think they have to get this far, but it's day 1 of the Budget Committee of the Whole. So we get the first look at the Joint Appropriations Committee's budget. And there are 3 whole days where it's pretty much just going to be the budget. Tomorrow, Friday, that's probably what it'll be. If you're a political wonk like I am, that's interesting. If you don't like numbers, like I have a lot of friends that just say, "Oh, that's numbers, I don't like it," then it might be kind of boring. But anyway, we'll get our first look at the budget. I think this one is going to have a lot of scrutiny because there's UW, PBS, the Wyoming Business Council. There's a whole bunch of stuff that has been proposed in this one. So hopefully it gets a little bit more scrutiny than in other years. Well, that pretty much burns up another busy broadcast hour on the program. Thank you for watching, my friends. Thank you for listening. Again, if you... The interview with Harriet Hageman is finally on the podcast now, so you can go listen to that. But thank you for watching. Don't miss the nightly news broadcast, the Roundup. You can find a link to that on the Open Range Record on the Facebook page. It's broadcast on YouTube, and so you can go find that. It got a lot of really good responses from our nightly news broadcast, and tonight we've got gubernatorial candidate Joseph Kibler. He's going to be joining the program, and that should be an interesting one. And maybe if I'm lucky, I'll round up another victim for tonight's show. But for now, my friends, from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics. See you tomorrow, my friends.